Welcome back. You're watching India Tonight. I'm Shivani Ghara, joining you guys from Mumbai, and joining us from Chennai is my colleague Jude Sanit. Now, a major development in the probe into the Air India Phuket-Delhi AI379 incident. Sources say the flight's pilot in command has tested positive for psychoactive substances in a confirmatory laboratory test. Now, both pilots were screened after the aircraft suddenly lost around 300 feet of altitude on August 4th, leaving 17 passengers and crew members injured. The initial screening of the pilot in command had flagged a concern, following which the sample was sent for confirmatory testing. Both pilots have since been taken off the flying roster, while the AAIB investigation continues into the incident, with the outgoing Air India CEO Campbell being called for questioning by the Ministry of Civil Aviation.
We wanted to get a direct update from Air India also on the incident, and we wanted to see how they are taking this issue from their side. And I have told time and again that from the ministry, safety in aviation is the topmost priority. There shouldn't be any compromise from any side, even the regulator or even the airlines or anyone. So this issue we have taken very, very seriously from the ministry side also. So we have just spoken to him as a preliminary task just to get an update. But I have to tell you that AIB has been given the task to continue on the investigation, and we have good confidence on AIB. So I would say that let us wait for the full-fledged report to come from AIB so that we can see what action, definitive action needs to be taken on this. But in the meantime, if it is anything related to substance abuse or substance using, I would say that from the ministry, we are taking it very, very seriously. And if we find that there needs to be some tweaking in the existing regulations, we are ready to do that also.
That was Union Civil Aviation Minister Ram Mohan Naidu there, but my colleague Shefali has a lot more details on this story. Let's go across to her from the latest.
In a fresh development in Air India Phuket-Delhi incident, now the result for confirmatory drug test has come, where pilot in command has tested positive for marijuana. This is what we are getting through sources, that the pilot in command who was operating the Phuket-Delhi flight has tested positive now in the second test. And today as well, in another update, the Air India top management was summoned by Ministry of Civil Aviation, where in the meeting, outgoing CEO Campbell, P. Balaji, who's the Air India group head, and other officials were also present. Senior officials, including MOCA Secretary, DGCA, and AAIB DG was also present, and was later headed by Ministry of Civil Aviation Minister Ram Mohan Naidu, where top management was asked tough questions by the ministry on this particular matter. But now that the test is positive, the AAIB will investigate on all fronts, including if there was in-flight turbulence, which was initially reported by Air India. Later, there was questions of if there was a technical fault, which is being reported in regards to autopilot being disconnected or hydraulic failure. So all these aspects will be now investigated in AAIB investigation. And now the most important part, that the pilot in command has tested positive for the psychoactive substance screening test. Now that will also be investigated in this particular investigation. With video journalist Himanshu, Shefali Nigam, ET Now.
Shefali speaking to us about the latest update on this story. But to discuss this now, we are joined in by Sanjay Lazar. He's an aviation expert and CEO of Avilas Consultants. Thank you so much, Mr. Lazar, for joining us today on ET Now. Now, help us understand, since, this is like a sources-based story that, the pilot tested positive for the drugs. Help us understand, how long does, any sort of psychoactive drug, or let's say the likes of marijuana, typically remain detectable in the pilot's blood sample that is under the DGCA mandated protocol? Help us understand that first.
Thank you, Shivani, for having me on your show. And I just want to make this clear. What I have heard is that the pilot's second sample has been positive. So it is positive for a psychotropic or a psychoactive substance. What the substance is, I'm not clear yet. I have not seen the report. I don't believe anybody has seen it yet. Okay, so I just want to point that out. So it must be for some particular labeled thing. Now you asked me the question of what time period does it stay in? Let's just call it in crew member or an employee's blood, because it's not only pilots, cabin crew also get screened, ATC people also get screened. Now the typical period is, it depends on what it is. If it's an amphetamine, 12 hours. If it's a barbiturate, 48 hours. Biodiazepine, 2 to 3 hours. Cannabinoids, 36 hours and plus in blood. But urine is 3 to 30 days. And hair or follicles, up to 90 days. So there is a long, for example, heroin will disappear in 12 hours from the blood, 4 days from the urine, and maybe about 90 days from the skin and the hair. Morphine takes 8 hours to get out of the blood, 6 days to get out of the urine. So typically here what has happened is they've tested the urine of the particular crew, and this is mandatory when an incident of this kind occurs. They've done that, and they finished the A sample and then gone to the B sample. There is part of the B sample that will be retained at the DGCA or the AAIB for the next 12 months in case there is a challenge, legal or otherwise. Now we come to part 2 of this, which is what happens here. Now, typically what would happen as per the DGCA car, this is section 5, part 5, psychoactive substance use. There is a punishment of grounding, there is counseling, there is then a rehabilitation process, because you have to check if there is behavioral, cognitive or physiological changes, whether there is addiction or not. All those things will take place. It could take anywhere from 3 months, even more. And after that,
on that note, since you explained it so well to us, Mr. Lazar, help us understand, and I have a counter question for you. Then in this case, why is it reactive? Why wait for the incident to happen to, go through all of these tests? Because this is not like a one-off incident. This has happened to an Indian pilot. But last year, for example, there was Nigerian Airlines where, alcohol was found in the pilot's blood. And they are flying people. People's life is at risk. So why is it a reactive test and not a proactive one?
Shivani, I'll just separate the two. Alcohol is tested on every flight before and after. Okay,
right.
So let's not mix that. And that has been going on for easily 35 years.
But what about drugs?
Now, drugs came in 4 or 5 years ago, and it is done at pre-employment stage or employment stage. Once it is done for everyone, then it's random testing, 10 to 15% maximum of pilots and crew are tested, and it's random. The only prescription is that in the event of an incident, accident, or crash, it is mandatory. So because it's a longer process, it's not so simple. If I did, for example, let's say I'm going on a flight today. I did a psychoactive substance test. The result is not something that comes immediately. It goes to a lab. So it would mean then you would have to sequester crew who are flying an aircraft, test them, and then say, okay, they've all cleared, now they can do that flight, which would mean then you're increasing the duty periods. It's never done anywhere in the world in this fashion. Everywhere in the world, it's random. It's not that, it's not
Right.
that every test, every flight, you have a test before and after. Just to clarify that point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Mr. Lazar, I completely understand that it could lead to a supply chain constraint of sorts when it comes to pilot resources should, dope tests be conducted on every pilot about to board, a flight and start duty. But surely this also calls for a lot of soul searching, one might reckon, when it comes to, hiring policies, when it comes to due diligence before pilots are hired, maybe periodic checks, if not daily checks or daily pre-flight checks. Surely these testing and drug samples being conducted at regular intervals, if not every flight, and needless to say, before a pilot is actually hired, could well become a new precedent and ought to be that way, surely in the interest of avoiding instances like these, you'd reckon.
Well, Jude, it already is there. It is a pre-employment requirement by the DGCA. It is not only a pre-employment requirement, even before a pilot cadet joins an FTO, flight training organization, he is required to undergo this. even before ATC people are selected, they're required to undergo before employing a flight crew member, AME, certifying staff, trainee pilots, instructors, examiners, uh, before even admitting a trainee pilot into a flight training organization, and follow-up testing is done. So there is a procedure already in place. There is no procedure to do it regularly, like you suggested. I do believe post this incident, it's going to now become monthly or every 2 3 months, because you've already seen the shelf life of the drug in the system or on the hair on DNA could go up to 90 days. So if you did a test every month or every 2 months, you would definitely catch any random drug use or recreational drug use or whatever it's called. Yeah, there is also the other thing which I think we need to point out. I'm not suggesting that it is in the case in this case. That is of you know self medication,
Right.
building substances. All those also register on these. However, the B test that is conducted is usually a very deep testing, which goes to the root of what is the substance within the urine. So I do believe they would
Right.
have
The
done
traces
proper.
can stay in the body and the shelf life of some of these substances are there, but pilots are aware of the fact that yes, there is alcohol test conducted prior to a flight, but no drug test conducted to a flight. And then there are many countries in the world where some of these drugs are available off shelves. Fly to the likes of Europe, at least 10 countries in Europe, sell drugs at regular grocery kind of stores. In United States, many states sell marijuana. So, and pilots are aware of the fact that it's impossible to conduct a drug test before a flight. Isn't that a loophole?
Therefore, what Jude probably suggested would then become the norm. It is a loophole, absolutely right. It would become, and remember, all these countries you mentioned also have their own airlines. They also have their own regulatory systems. They also have their testing processes. As a crew member, whether you're a cabin crew member, engineer, ATC, or a pilot, you're fully cognizant and aware of what kind of norms you have by your regulator. You also know that a drug cannot, let's say you go to a rock concert and you decide, oh, let's smoke a reefer or weed. You know that it's going to be so many days before it gets out of your blood. It's going to be so many days before it gets out of your urine. So you've got to be really careful in some cases. And Shivani, this is very interesting. Let's say I went to Tomorrowland in Belgium, and I smoked up there, and I was on holiday. I came back 20 days later and I went for a test. It could possibly still be in my system. Though I'm not under the influence while going on a flight. I'm not defending anybody, but I would like to make this very clear distinction. So therefore, the norms have been drawn up accordingly. Perhaps periodic tests is what is required now.
No, absolutely, Mr. Lazar. In fact, I firmly believe that if you hold the responsibility of captaining a flight, I think drugs should not be anywhere on the table, let alone just before a flight. So, that aside, surely periodic testing will and should be the norm going forward. But I just want to shift focus just a little bit and ask you about Air India itself. It's been a tumultuous time for the airline. Campbell Wilson there resigning, all set to serve his last day on the 30th of September, but still very much in the eye of the storm, especially given the the AI379 incident. Where does the airline go from here, really? Because it's clearly been one controversy after another, one lapse after another. Trying times and dark days for the airline, you'd reckon.
Well, Jude, you hit the nail on the head. It is trying times and dark days for the airline. It's been a tumultuous last 18 months for the carrier, and my heart bleeds for them. I do believe that a lot of remember, there were also a number of technical issues on this flight which were communicated to the ground and to their headquarters as well as to the DGCA, and those will now come under focus because remember, Airbus and BEA have joined the investigation. This is another spell of embarrassment, and I do believe that transparency is the need of the day. You've got to communicate better. I do believe that somehow, unfortunately, Air India is the communications are just not flowing through enough, and perhaps this might again be another body blow coming soon after 171 a year. And I'm hoping that the new CEO will come in and, breathe some fresh life. Air India is a wonderful, wonderful airline. It's been our national carrier for so many years, and I have great faith and belief that they have the ability to turn around and become nation's best, and maybe top in the world. I pray and hope that things change strongly. Campbell Wilson is a great guy. He's had a rough time of it, of course, no doubt about it. But he's got his heart in the right place as well. I've had interactions with him. I will say this for him. I think the system needs a lot of changing. Our regulatory framework is very poor. We need to tear it down and rebuild. Perhaps we need a CAA kind of independent initiative. Maybe time has come for a group of us to just file a public interest litigation and get this cleared out. This is our aviation. We are going to become the third largest nation in the world with 3,000 aircraft, 300 airports.
And still, it's a duopoly market for the country.
Well, it's a duopoly market in the airports.
Right.
It's a duopoly market in airlines as well. And we need to change all this. So
right.
I do believe lots needs to be corrected.
Right, Mr. Lazar, thank you so much for your inputs on this story. Thanks for joining us today on ET Now. Well, it is time for us to slip into a very short break. You don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.